So I think we'll get started. Oh, one more person. Well, welcome everybody to the Halton Families for Families workshop for the evening. I would just like to go through some housekeeping items before we get into some introductions. Your microphone and video have been turned off just to ensure your privacy as we are recording tonight's presentation. However, for the discussion and conversation piece, which happens generally around the 8 o'clock hour, we may stop recording and you may wish to unmute yourself, perhaps to ask a question or turn your video off if you choose, but we'll leave that at your discretion once we get to that point. We want to ensure your safety here this evening, so you'll notice on your screen there's a couple of phone numbers. One is for our crisis line, should you need their services, as well as the ROC's access line. And that's not just for this evening, that's moving forward. If you need anything from ROC. I also want to explain to you a little bit about the chat. So if you could just change the screen change a slide for me, please. Thank you. So my name is Maria Rosa, and I'll be your chat moderator for the evening. So if there's any questions or comments that you would like to put in the chat box privately to me, I'll hold on to them until the very end. But if you have a thought, a burning ask, and you need to type it out before you forget, I know it happens to me all the time, please feel free to do so. You don't need to wait till 8 o'clock. I will periodically ask you and remind you that the chat feature is there. I'll also be posting some information in the chat box for you to read as we go through the evening, as well as if the presenter makes reference to anything, I may put something there for you as well. So periodically you may want to check that out. I want to also just take some time oh, I'm sorry. Lost my train of thought there for a second. Too many things going on at on my screen. Once we get through the slide, we're going to go into something that's called a land acknowledgement. For those of you who have attended our workshops before, this is a little bit new. So I would just like to take a moment and just to honor and welcome you to our event. Let's take a moment right now to allow yourself to fully arrive. Allow the dust to settle in your mind. Bring your attention to your body, your breath, this present moment. Inhale a deep breath and exhale slowly. You have arrived. Welcome. We would like to acknowledge that we are meeting on Aboriginal land that has been inhabited by Indigenous peoples from the beginning. As settlers, we're grateful for the opportunity to meet here, and we thank all of the generations of people who have taken care of this land for thousands of years. In particular, we acknowledge the traditional territory of the Neutral, the Haudenosaunee, and the Anishinaabe peoples. We recognize and deeply appreciate their historic connection to this place. We also recognize the contribution of the Métis, Inuit, and other Indigenous peoples have made both in shaping and strengthening this community in particular, and our province and country as a whole. At this time, I'd like to introduce to you our co-facilitator, Christina.
Welcome, everyone. Thank you, Maria Rosa. Thank you for registering for this workshop with us this evening. My name's Christina, and I'm a student volunteer for Families for Families. Halton Family for Families is a community collaborative that is here to support you and your family. We are volunteer parents and caregivers who partner with community organizations to organize events, workshops, and socials where you can connect with each other, where you can connect with other families and be supported and feel comfortable as a family. Please feel free to check out our website, www.haltonfamilyforfamilies.com. I'd like to introduce our workshop, Financial Wellness, presented by ADAPT. Our presenter this evening is Ashley Davidson. She is a program manager at Halton ADAPT for the Problem, Gambling, and Behavioral Addictions team. This program services individuals and families who are struggling with a gambling, technology overuse and gaming, overspending, or hypersexuality issues. Services are free and confidential. Individuals and group opportunities are available for most programs. Ashley works individually with clients and in group formats and facilitates a provincially funded treatment program for problem gambling. She and her team also provide awareness presentations to the community in order to educate individuals on recognizing the signs of problematic behaviors. We welcome you, Ashley, and are very happy to have you join us for our workshop this evening.
Oh, thank you so much, Christina. And thank you everyone for having me. So I am, as Christina mentioned, that was a perfect introduction, from Halton Adapt. So we are a nonprofit addictions organization that services people with mental health and addiction issues. We call them concurrent disorders. So we are located in Burlington, Oakville, Milton, Acton, Georgetown. And we have a variety of programs, as you can see on the left. We have a great youth program which services not only individuals like young people struggling with addictions and mental health, but also parents and caregivers. We have adult substance use, specific opiate, as well as community withdrawal support, housing opportunities, and each one of our programs sees the benefits and importance of having friends and family programming. So we're very fortunate to get to offer those. Myself with the problem gambling and behavioral. So I won't go too much further into it. Christina did a great job at listing all the responsibilities, but we really put a lot of our behavioral addictions programming together because what we noticed is it's not just those that struggle with mental health and addictions that are having spending issues, it's our community and society as a whole. So we're very fortunate to be able to put this together and to reach out to different community partners. And it's great to just be here this evening. So financial wellness, what is that? Essentially, financial well-being is about feeling a sense of security and as though you have enough money to meet your needs. A lot of times when we discuss finances with people, it can be such an uncomfortable subject. So I really commend you guys for showing up today. And of course, if you have questions at the end, feel free to ask, or if it's a little bit personal, because that's what money is. And we all have different access and different issues with it. You can always reach out and get our information at the end. But essentially, financial well-being, you want to feel a sense of control over your day-to-day finances, but we also want to pay attention to feeling some sort of financial freedom. And what that means is that we feel as though we have the choices to allow you to enjoy your life. So it's not just about living to pay off bills and all this debt, is we have to be able to survive and enjoy our lifestyle. So financial wellness, it's closely connected with our physical and mental health. And that's something that we commonly overlook as well. I know it wasn't until I went into this role at Adapt where I really started to learn about how, detrimental stress can be and the anxiety when it comes to talking about finances and that D word, debt. So many people are stressed about their finances. It's really important that we start to find healthy areas to explore this and discuss this and learn. Now, financial literacy, a lot of times we hear this term thrown around, but it's essentially having the knowledge, skills, and confidence to make informed financial decisions. And I don't know about the majority here, but growing up, it was never taught in school the importance of saving or credit or the notion of having too much access to things. So as an adult, gaining my independence, a big piece of it was starting to learn these ropes on my own. And so I take comfort that nowadays they're starting to introduce these programs into schools with our young ones because young minds need this education. But some adults and adolescents and seniors, we also need that as well. So that's kind of the purpose of putting this together and offering it to you folks today. So our relationship with money is, I don't think we spend enough time reflecting upon, our past and why we're maybe struggling with finances today. So each of us has, very many meanings towards money. And as we go through this presentation, even if you're here with the notion to support somebody else, try to really formulate the picture of your experience with it and what your situation looks like. That's when we truly start to absorb some of the information. So we all have deeply rooted beliefs about money. For a lot of people, it evokes very powerful feelings within us. So some people that don't have a lot of access to money, they feel stress, they feel sad, there can be depression. And on the other end of that is some people that have too much access, there's the same emotions just for different reasons. Right. And so when we talk about overspending a little bit later, you'll see that it doesn't really discriminate against people due to their income, right? As it can really impact all of us, regardless of what our situation is. So when we think about money, a lot of times when people are struggling, especially with addictions or mental health, there's a simple solution where people say, well, just eliminate access. But that's easier said than done because we all need money in order to survive, to support our lifestyle. But money can be quite consuming in our thoughts and emotions, right? So a lot of times our thoughts each and every day is, how am I going to pay this bill? Or what's next month going to look like? And I think the COVID pandemic also increased a lot of the stress and tension and anxiety that we carry because there's so much uncertainty going on right now. So it's important to recognize that this stress is kind of here to stay, but we can certainly lighten the intensity of it that we carry. So we commonly hear the phrase, well, money's the root to all happiness. However, on the other end of that, it's also the root of all evil sometimes, especially for people that struggle with impulsivity or haven't had the appropriate education to make the best financial decisions. So when you think about your relationship with money, this is where we have to really dig deep. And oftentimes when I work with people to provide this education, I get them to really think back to their childhood experiences because it goes in different directions. Some people say, my parents, my grandparents, they were really frugal and cautious the way that they spent money, right? Maybe you were put on an allowance from an early age and you really had to work hard for every single dollar that came in. So oftentimes that population, they have a strong understanding of money. However, if mental health or addiction issues or trauma, increased stress, crises, as we go through these in our adolescence and adulthood, sometimes we lose those values that were once instilled from an early age. On the other end of that spectrum, I have a lot of folks that say, my parents, my grandparents, they weren't responsible with money. Maybe they had problems themselves. Maybe money wasn't available and people had to really stress about it or really strive to just make ends meet. So the basic education's not there. And, I'm a firm believer that you can always teach an old dog new tricks. Is it's never too late to gain some of this education and start asking questions and making some financial changes. So that's part of kind of our relationship with money is it goes back to childhood. It's also connected to our adolescence because that's when money's oftentimes introduced and we're given all this access if we choose to take it. And that can be overwhelming for a lot of young people. Our cultural background is also really important to consider. Is I come from a family of gift givers. And oftentimes gifts equaled love and affection. And so part of our family deprogramming over the past few years has been to challenge that notion that gifts equal love and instead to replace it with time and energy. Right. And I think this Christmas was a perfect example where we were kind of like limited with going out and spending and purchasing things. So hopefully you guys were able to connect with people virtually or, distance in person and be able to see that, maybe our concept of gift giving can change a little bit. Another thing to watch out for is the messages that we receive from the media and other people. Because a lot of times when we think about money, we're thinking about success and self-worth. And that can have a really detrimental effect on our self-esteem and our mental health as well. And we'll talk about that a little bit later on in the presentation. Credit. So sometimes when I bring up credit, I feel the tension in the room, or I can see that people just don't want to go there, right? Because along with credit becomes that D word of debt. So credit was introduced to us in the late 80s. And once it was introduced, it significantly shifted the way that we view, value, and spend money. So it introduced this concept of, well, buy now and worry about it later. You can pay it off. You have more access, money will come in. What this introduced to us was the concept of instant gratification. And this isn't limited to people with mental health or addictions. This was society at large. So this notion that if I want a new pair of shoes or a couch or a new sink, I can just tap it and put it on the plastic and worry about paying it off later. That became very challenging for a lot of people. And now a lot of us are becoming accustomed to debt. And that really weighs on our psyche or emotional impact. So with credit, some of the strategies that we recommend is, trying to pay your balance in full and on time each month. That can be uncomfortable to take in, right? But what that does is it readjusts how you're spending and what you're spending money on. Interest. So sometimes we overlook interest, and it's another thing that we're just desensitized to, and it becomes a norm that we pay interest on everything. But really, when we start to factor in the amount of interest we pay on balances owing, sometimes we're paying for items multiple times. So that's something to really try to realign your value system with is this, new couch or pair of shoes or car, is it worth double, triple the price if I can't afford to pay it in full? Now, credit card rewards. I work with a lot of gambling and overspending clients, and anytime we see the word rewards, people associate that with free, right? As I'm getting something free. But that oftentimes is what we call a cognitive distortion because we believe it's true because we hear it and we take that message in and we think that way. But really, when we start to challenge it with facts, we recognize that we're paying far more than what the original price was. Another thing I talk a lot about with clients is looking at the access. So opening up your wallet and seeing what's truly in there and what we could really remove. So when I work with clients, usually by the time they get to me, they have pretty significant debt issues. They have multiple credit cards. Regardless of the bonuses and the rewards, there's still so much debt with a lot of individuals. So, with the type of clientele I work with, they have anywhere from 3 to 15 credit cards, right? And again, the more access you have to things, the more likely you are to rack them up to spend them. So it's really important to try to avoid the temptation, regardless of the rewards or incentives or, the $0 payment every year, is we really have to check ourselves and say, if I get access to this, am I likely to spend it? Am I likely to get debt? Now, it's also easier when people have a variety of cards and bills and money owing. It's very easy to miss payments and deadlines, right? So don't have more cards or expenses than you can manage. Because again, we really want to lighten the load of the stress that we carry. And late fees or interest payments, these quickly obliterate the sign-up gifts or the rewards, right? So oftentimes the rewards aren't worth the amount of money that we have that owing. Acting in your own best interest. So many people, they cut down on interest and borrowing, and they say it's easier said than done. And I completely agree with that, is it's really challenging to make changes, especially if you've been on a system for a while, or you're saying, well, I already have multiple cards and I already have multiple debts. So if that's the case for some of you, it comes down to really checking, necessities, luxuries, and material items. This was a really important shift for me as I have gotten older, is I really had to check myself and ask, what are my needs versus what are my wants? So a perfect example is you go to the grocery store, you need bread, cheese, and milk, right? But you want those chips or that candy or those granola bars or the funky cereal. So quickly in the grocery store, we can start to overspend, and every purchase, every dollar amount, it does count, right? So sometimes some of us get quite impulsive or quite careless, thinking, well, I already have debt. My situation's not going to improve overnight, so I might as well get the things that I want. So that's really important to check in on, is even the small things matter. Now, when it comes to larger things, this is where we see that significant debt, right? Is a lot of people do say, I need a car, but do you need a top of the line luxurious car, right? Or can you settle with something that gets you from A to B and not have to stress about the excess debt or payments for 7 years? Right. So we always say is try to think about if you can afford to pay things in cash, if you have the luxury of time where you can start to save for these things, right? Or really start to budget, can I afford to make these payments over the next 7 years? I think the current pandemic, it really introduced a lot of anxiety for folks, but some of that anxiety was good, where it really let us know when we were limited towards going to places that we really didn't need a lot of those things after all. So really start to pay attention to that. Is in small stores, even with gas nowadays, do I need to fill up my tank all the way, or to be cost conscious, can I fill it up 3/4? So these are small ways that we can start to save. It's the same with living situations. And I know when I work with young people, a lot of times they're very impulsive with their spending because they feel a sense of hopelessness or very discouraged towards their future because they're thinking, look at these housing prices. How am I going to afford that on a basic salary? It definitely is super challenging nowadays, right? But being more financially responsible from an early age is super important, and really checking those needs and wants, because we don't need to purchase a home right now if we're not ready for it, right? Is we can always rent or share space, which a lot of people are doing nowadays. So a healthy estimate, and we'll put a couple of these tidbits of advice in here. So it's not applicable to everybody, but a healthy estimate, if you have a mortgage payment, is that it shouldn't cost more than 30% of your monthly take-home pay. And we'll talk a little bit more about some of these percentages as we go. But it's important to draw attention to overspending. So you might hear this term thrown around quite a bit, but what is it? So it's when an individual's spending, it starts to negatively impact their life. Overspending is what we call one of our addiction programs, because we saw that shopping was quite limited and that we had to encompass all the different issues that people can experience. So what do I mean by it negatively impacts someone's life? Is that they start to experience emotional issues, or it can make existing mental health worse. It can really impact your social aspect, where you're no longer attending events, maybe because you don't have the money to give gifts, if you believe that that's part of the culture. Or also, when we have spending issues, we're very limited to the functions that and lifestyle choices we can make. We also see a lot of issues within families, right? As different people having different ideas of spending and saving, and this can cause a lot of friction and tension. But we have, a lot of individuals struggling with financial issues. So it's always good to reach out and just talk to somebody, and I'll give you guys some resources and supports for that as well. But when overspending becomes very problematic, individuals report that they not only spend beyond their means, that there's a bit of an inability to stop spending despite these negative consequences, right? So despite, family becoming involved, or you noticing your mental health is getting worse, is oftentimes the overspending is providing something much more than financial satisfaction. Is there's a bit of an emotional issue that starts to occur, or that heightens that it previously existed. So a challenging thing is that overspending, it's very close to when we work with gambling clients, is it really starts to consume a lot of people's thoughts. So people that struggle with overspending, they report that they're preoccupied with thoughts to purchase or to browse or to seek out really good deals. This can become overwhelming as people are now hyper focusing on one behavior and sometimes neglecting other responsibilities that they might have, including their self-care. What can also happen with overspending is very similar to substance use, and not many people know this, is it has the same impacts on the brain. Overspending, gaming to excess, technology issues, gambling. It's the same as substance use issues in what starts to occur in the brain, where you produce an excess of dopamine. So people get that rush, that exhilarated feeling, and they become really accustomed to that. But what happens when that rush is over is they're back to feeling those emotional issues, right? When people recognize, well, this is a problem for me, and they try to make changes. Similar to substance use as well, is people can experience withdrawal from overspending or gambling issues. What that looks like is oftentimes very intense anxiety, like, well, what am I going to do with my time? Where am I going to spend my money? How am I going to pay this debt? Now I have to focus on these other things. So that intense anxiety can happen, or depression can dip. So now that you no longer have that dopamine release or those places to go and be social, that can really impact the mental health. So there's a bit of a withdrawal effect, even though you're not physically ingesting anything. Now, problematic shopping, it can also include goods and services. So it's not always limited to people going out or online and into stores and purchasing materials. Is sometimes we see people overspend on exercise programs or classes or massages or cosmetic procedures. So goods and services are included in this as well, and experiences. So the majority of us love going to the movies or seeing a great concert, or of course going on trips and traveling once we can do that again. But what we notice is people with overspending issues will neglect to focus on their financial wellness and more so excessively engage in these things. So it's great to have them every once in a while, but everything within moderation and balance is the key. Now, continued overspending can lead to not only significant debt, but issues with the legal system. Is we have a lot of people come to us and there's so much debt that a consumer report has to go through, a consumer proposal, needs to go through, or bankruptcy. We also unfortunately deal with a lot of people that have criminal issues. And these are not bad people, is these are good people that feel that desperation in order to get funds to fuel this addictive behavior, right? So we see a lot of theft, a lot of fraud. And again, this goes to show how far people will go against their morals and values when they're struggling with something and not processing it. Quick facts. I always love to give these. So this research was back in 2007. I'm very confident it's much higher nowadays. Unfortunately, we're very far behind in the research as to when we can present it. But approximately 5.8% of our population has reported a problem with overspending. And keep in mind that these are largely people that are coming forth to services and acknowledging that problem. A lot of times there's stigma or really desensitized and not knowing where to go for help and support. So it largely goes underreported. Typically, problems with spending will start in the late teens or early 20s. And why I think this is a lot of times this is when kids are going to college, university, getting their first cell phone, getting their first credit card. So having access to more things, and it's about that age when those spending issues can pick up. Now, overspending is not limited to the holidays, and that's an important myth to debunk, is this happens year round. And it's so different for, everybody, because we have different special events, right? As sometimes we have very intense birthday months where it feels like every family member and friend's birthday. And so that can be a month where we're financially strapped or overspending as well. And as I mentioned earlier, our income, it has little impact on overspending. So the majority of my clients will be those intensive couponers or people seeking out garage sales. It's the small things that really start to add up, or looking for a good bargain. But there are definitely people that struggle with high-end boutiques as well. Now, there is an important myth that I always like to debunk, and that's that women have more of a problem than men. it's actually quite evenly distributed, if you can believe it. It's the language that we use that separates the two. So women will oftentimes acknowledge, I'm a shopaholic, I have a shopping addiction, whereas men, they're the collectors. So a lot of men will overspend by collecting sports memorabilia or tools or different things like that. So they won't necessarily say I have a problem with shopping, but I'm a collector. That can run you into debt and also overspending issues as well. So that's important to explore if it's something that's applicable to them. Now, financial cues, these are great to watch amongst our loved ones, but also within ourselves. So other than Christmas, we should not be hiding our purchases, right? We shouldn't be keeping receipts from other people or kind of destroying them in the car or not taking them from the store, right? Also having multiple financial accounts, right? That can be a financial cue that there might be an overspending issue. Also unexplained expenditures, right? So if you're noticing, a set amount of money withdrawn from the bank account, but you're not sure where it went, that was something that you'd want to question with your loved one or within your own purchases, is we really want to be sure we know where we're spending things. With a lot of young ones I work with and a lot of families is we have parents bringing their kids in saying, mom and dad were arguing for spending this excess money because they were purchasing Steam and we thought this was like massage therapy, but really it's a gaming account. So a lot of times children are gaining access to mom and dad's credit cards, and we really have to watch those expenses as well, because that can be an indication that our young ones have an issue. Right? If they're constantly purchasing games and skins and weapons and all these things, we really want to be mindful that they have financial awareness, and permission is really important. Be aware of missing money and valuables. So of course, some people become very desperate when money isn't available. And so we'll see people be focusing on the buy and sell a lot in order to get money to fuel purchasing even more items. So that's something we want to be mindful of. Unpaid bills and past due notices. So I commonly see that a lot of families have one person that's responsible for finances, and that's maybe a system that they've been on for 5, 10, 20 plus years. It's really great that both partners, or if you have a young person, that you're checking in on the account every once in a while. Right. And it's not to treat everybody like a child. It's more so just to be kind of cost conscious and have that financial awareness. Is you want to make sure there's no unpaid bills, past due notices, anything you're missing because you don't normally pay attention to it. A huge red flag when we're working with clients is when people start cashing in their savings. We've definitely seen a spike in this due to COVID. And I can certainly understand that, money can be sparse nowadays. Try your best to hold onto your savings, hold onto your investments if they're safe, as well as your retirement plans. This can be a huge cue that somebody's having an issue with overspending or gambling when you're seeing a lot of the money come out of the account. Having excess credit cards or loans, or carrying large balances. I'll talk about this a little bit later, but it's really good every once in a while to run your credit score and credit report, because you want to make sure that you're very aware of all the debt that's attached to you, and also that it's your debt. Because we live in a day and age where there's a lot of fraud, identity theft, and so sometimes there's unexplained money or excessive credit cards or loans that aren't actually attached to us. So credit scores and reports are great to run, once a year, once every 2 years. Also be mindful of an individual's need for control of a bank account. So sometimes when I do these presentations and I say, hey, if you haven't in a while, take a look at your finances within a partnership or check on the kids. If people have that kind of restraint or resistance on showing access, that might be a cue that there's something going on that you might want to talk about. Now, there are reasons for problematic behaviors. So a lot of times people don't choose to overspend. They don't choose to gamble. There's oftentimes a lot of emotional issues or deeply rooted things that are occurring that are difficult to bring to the surface. So individuals who struggle with low self-esteem is people feel safe going into stores. They feel less judged. Sometimes it's great to walk into a space where somebody's excited to see you and says, "Hey, how are you? I haven't seen you in a while." So a lot of time our self-worth becomes attached to the things that we have. A lot of times people will also say, "Well, I can't go to this social event. I don't have an outfit." When really we have a closet full of outfits. We just don't want to reuse it. And a lot of times that's due to fear of judgment, or when we spend too much time comparing ourselves to others. So that's something that we really want to keep in check. Anxiety, depression, really any form of mental health. Because when people engage in the overspending, it's an opportunity to avoid that sensation. I know a lot of people with physical health issues, chronic pain, pretty intensive mental health that say, "Well, I go shopping or I browse online because I don't feel that pain." That's very true, because a lot of times when you're engaging in these exciting behaviors where you feel as though you're going to get a benefit from it, it does provide that short-term relief from your experiences, your emotions. But in the long term, it becomes detrimental because people avoid working on them, right? So it's short-term relief, but there's no long-term gains. It also provides social connection. It helps us to feel less alone. It helps us to feel accepted. And a lot of times materials and luxuries help us to build confidence. But recognize that that's a really superficial way, right? And we want people to get to know us for who we are and the good qualities we have and what we can offer into the world. Escape and distraction. So this is also big, especially now. We're very limited in the things that we can do. And I've never been so excited to sometimes go to a grocery store. So a lot of times people are looking for that escape or distraction that temporarily takes their mind off the stress that we're faced with each and every day, or negative events. So over time, what we see is it becomes an unhealthy coping response, where instead of facing the issues, we're just trying to escape from them. So how to avoid overspending? We could have lists and lists and lists of this, so we just combined some of the top ones. Be very aware of retail tricks, as I myself am guilty of really buying into these sometimes, where you see store closing, but then the store's closing for a year and it might even still be open, or the BOGO sales, buy one, get one. And we don't really need to, but since we're perceiving that something's free, we oftentimes engage in it. So be very mindful that the industry's clever. They do a lot of research. They invest millions of dollars, certain companies and corporations and stores, where they say, what is going to draw somebody into our store, right? What can we put up at the front that's most appealing? What can we have pop up as an advertisement that's going to make somebody click on that? Right? So once you buy into those tricks, it gets the dopamine flowing, which makes the brain feel really excited and good. So that's a lot of times how they catch you. Cut up or cancel your credit cards, reduce your limits. This can be a really important change for some people. When we talk about credit, what I say is if you have financial issues, you shouldn't have cash advances. The bank charges you so much extra interest for buying into this. So that's something that you want to eliminate, as well as overdraft. Because again, when we have access to overdraft, of course, it's good to have that emergency cushion, but is it too much, right? Can you minimize that a little bit or get rid of it entirely? So what that means is what's in your account is what you're forced to spend. Now shop with a limited amount of cash. Only carry what you're prepared to spend. And this has been very helpful for me in the last few years, is make a list before going to the store. This is when we do those impulse buys. It's always at the end, or I went in Winners before Christmas and it was like every little trinket you wanted to pick up. It was so exciting. But be mindful that that's also a trick as well. So we really want to carry a small amount of cash. What's very interesting is we actually have a biological attachment to cash, to currency, because we were born with it and raised with it. I'll ask a question, and I know I can't really see anybody, but how many of you essentially walk around with a small, medium, or large bill, but neglect to pay with that bill and instead use your plastic. So we may carry that bill around for days, weeks, months, but we're still tapping and going. Why that is because we have that biological attachment to currency. When we pay with it, it activates the pain receptors in our brain. So it physically pains us to hand over that bill, but we don't have that same attachment to plastic. So we're more likely to tap and go, not look at the total, not ask for it, not keep the receipt, because some of us think, well, I don't even want to think about that purchase. Right? So becoming more aware of each dollar and also carrying cash can be a great trick to get you back on track. Plan for the holiday season and special occasions. So know your very triggering or uncomfortable times, right? Make a plan for it and keep it easy over the next few years, right? As I hope that some of you were able to experience, the holidays a little different this year. And what I mean by that is purchase gift cards, right? You don't have to be buying the newest items, contribute to a gift with people. So really check in on that gift giving and try to make it simple with gift cards. Call support people or take a trusted friend shopping, or, if you're browsing online for more than 30 minutes, call someone, because the moment that you make yourself accountable, right, the less likely you are to continue to overspend or be stuck in that moment with yourself. Of course, limit the self-gifting. And I work with a lot of people that say, I've got holes in my shoes and I haven't bought myself a new jacket in years. But watch the purchases for other people, because oftentimes, a lot of people are guilty of taking care of everybody else around them, too good of care of other people and not enough care of ourselves. So that's something that you also want to be mindful of. Take a look at the subscriptions or magazines or, memberships that you have, and really try to think about canceling or maybe putting them on hold for a few months, because any money that comes in from the changes you make can be put away into savings for a rainy day. You might want to block certain internet shopping sites or channels. I know with Facebook, one of the updates is that you can start to remove ads, right? So this is big, is if you find ads triggering or they're just popping up all the time, that's something that you might want to look into. The less triggers that we have, the more likely we are to engage in certain sites or certain spending. Track your spending. For some people, it's worth it to start tracking every single purchase, because even coffees add up. And sometimes when I say, well, you can make changes in certain areas, people get really anxious when I mention coffee or cable, right? But sometimes these changes, they're just temporary and they don't have to be permanent. Build a budget. And that can be very, very overwhelming for some people. So I will give you some resources and supports that will help you to build that, because that's difficult to do on your own, especially if you haven't had the resources or educations for it. And definitely have savings and reward goals. Is regardless of the amount of debt that you have, I want to go back to that financial freedom, financial wellness, is all of us have to believe that we have a choice or choices going forward into our future. So everyone should have a reward goal or two. If it's a trip that you one day want to take, it doesn't matter if it's going to take you a year, 5 years, 10 years to save for it, is we all need something to look forward to, especially in this day and age. Now, reward goals don't always have to be these lavish trips. Is sometimes people report high levels of happiness by just saving up and going to dinner and a movie with somebody, right? Is going to a concert, going to a sporting event. So it's keeping it simple, but doing the things that we enjoy, that we find rewarding. It takes us out of that stress and pressure that a lot of us experience so often. Now, we oftentimes refer to overspending as getting caught in this cycle, right? Because worrying about your finances, which a lot of us do, it can make your mental health poor. When your mental health is poor and you're feeling down, you're looking for those quick, easy escapes. A lot of times that leads to overspending. So overspending for some people is seen as the solution to the problem, but when you're engaging in that behavior, it becomes a bigger problem, right? But we'll just avoid that for a while and keep doing it. But then the mental health becomes poor. So it becomes this vicious cycle that we get trapped in sometimes. This is where we really want to be mindful of the needs versus wants. So just to clarify, the needs are things that you need to survive, right? So we might need a basic car, we need shelter, we need adequate clothing, not too much, right? Not a new wardrobe. So just keeping it very simple. Our wants are what enhances our everyday life, but it's not essential, right? And it's always good to have things that you want, but to be very mindful of what your current situation is and what purchasing that, what long-term effect that might have. So part of like my information and how I've absorbed this is I think back to my grandparents. So my grandparents came here from Scotland and England, and they basically had to build a life from the ground up. They didn't come with much. And so they were quite frugal and they spent on basic necessities. And I really checked myself and looked back to them and said, well, how can I apply that to my daily life? Because it's all about keeping it simple, right? Making a spending plan, a monthly budget, keeping these things in writing, setting goals, monitoring our progress, right? Seeing the small benefits that we start to accumulate. It's not going to be the solution to our debt overnight, but it feels good to even make a plan and say, okay, I'm mindful of all the debt that I have, and I have a plan to start paying it off. So try to think back to that simpler time, if there was one in your family, and how you can take some of the strategies that maybe the older generations once had. A big part of that is not getting caught up on technology, right? As I'm guilty of this myself, is social media, the news, all these things, they try to tell you the things that you need, right? But again, look back and say, well, I don't need that, but I like it. So maybe one day if I save for it. So really start to decipher the messages we take in from the media versus the reality of our realm and maybe what we were brought up with. Track your spending and be mindful of how you feel when spending. So we run an overspending program. It's a 5-week program. And what we offer the individuals is to do a spending journal each week, right? Write down every coffee purchase, every grocery store trip, what you put in for gas, because sometimes when we actually put all those dollars on paper, we can quickly see where we're starting to overspend. So try to track it in a way that makes sense for you. Sometimes people say that's way too overwhelming for me, Ashley. So I say then pick some of the problematic places, right? Whether it's Amazon, sometimes the grocery store, and just try to focus on the excess spending there. Cut out and reduce expenses that don't serve your goals. It's really important to have financial goals. And when you have these reward goals or financial goals, you no longer look at money as free money or extra money, because I truly believe that in this day and age, there's no such thing as extra money, right? Our money can always go towards something. Another thing you can do with your banks is the banks are really great, and it's always good to connect and see what options that you have. You can set daily and weekly withdrawal limits. So some people that say, well, I have a daily limit, but I maybe wait until midnight and then spend again and then spend again. You can set those weekly withdrawal limits as well. So you can't go over a set amount of money. And that can be really helpful for some folks. Now, with a COVID lens, we like to talk about financial wellness. You folks are going to receive a handout, and it's going to have some of the specific information as well. But contact your bank and creditor, as we recognize that everybody in Canada and pretty much globally is struggling with finances right now. So there are a lot of opportunities and plans that you can put in place to protect you. Set up an emergency recovery plan, right? And that's something that the bank or your creditors can do with you, and discuss options. So sometimes there is kind of payment holidays or forgiveness months, things like that, right? So instead of going into the negative, it's about negotiating and keeping in touch with people as opposed to avoiding. Try to access employment insurance or the Canada Recovery Benefit. So the CRB is hopefully going to continue to support Canadians in offering, support as we go through this challenging time, because I know a lot of people and businesses have been impacted. So it's good to keep up to speed on what options you have, especially now that we're approaching tax time. It might be good to connect and see, do I have any extra support programs that I can access? Avoid panic spending. So I can remember when COVID hit and our toilet paper sensation that we went through it's really difficult to not caught up on what people are posting online, or families calling you saying the toilet paper's out and you're rushing to 8 different stores. So it's important that you, of course, buy a few essential items, but certainly avoid stockpiling, right? Especially if you're concerned about your income. Shop with a list, so be very specific with that list and be strategic with what you need. The other thing is creating a budget. And again, you don't have to do this alone. There's a lot of different services that can offer free support in helping you do this. So in creating a budget, you also want to factor in an emergency plan that takes into account, well, what if something happens? What if I can't make this payment? Prioritize your expenses and remove or limit the ones that are just less of a priority. So again, people don't like to hear this from me, but your coffee money, right? Your cable, if anybody still has that, being on a high intensity phone plan. So there's certain things that when we break it down, we can say, I don't need that for the next few months. I can make changes here, because any extra money, again, goes towards the more important things or that emergency fund. There is a budgeting tool that you can use for free, and you guys are going to get the link to this on the handout. This is really great. The Financial Consumer Agency of Canada released this, and I'll give you guys a few more resources as well. But you can also speak with a credit counselor, and I'll talk more about that in a second. But credit counselors, it's much more of a diverse system outside of just consumer proposals and bankruptcy. So there's a plethora of other resources and activities they can support you with. Try your best not to use your credit cards, which is so tough nowadays, especially because we're very accustomed to using them. So it's very tempting, but in times of financial hardship is try to work towards paying off the balance, the little increments, the large increments that you can. But again, set your daily and weekly limit on your credit and debit cards. Avoid extra bank fees. So this is when you want to take a look at your access. If you're paying multiple fees in multiple accounts, can you reduce any of those accounts? Can you cancel any credit cards which you're paying extra fees on? Can you consolidate some of your debt? So there's, again, a variety of different resources, but keeping up to date on these things and trying to force yourself to pay attention as opposed to avoid, because avoidance can be quite detrimental. Now, savings. Sometimes right now, people do not want to hear about savings. It's too tough to think about. But savings, they are a necessity and not a luxury. So emergency funds, try to save 1 to 3 months of your expenses. That can be very far-fetched for some people, but try to save at least a rent payment or two. And again, in times of stress, it can be good to save these because it releases that anxiety that we feel. Pay yourself first. This was one of my important changes. So take a percentage of your income and put it away. And the best method is out of sight, out of mind. So sometimes opening up a TFSA or an RSP or an additional savings account that you can't access, it's good to just filter even small or medium amounts in there just in case you need it one day. Set financial goals. And what we mean by that is set very short-term goals. What do you want to see happen in the next 3 to 6 months? Set mid goals, right? So over the next 1 to 2 years, and long-term goals, that 5-year plan. And again, for some people, that can be really hard to consider right now. So start with the small and mid, right? And that's why it helps to work with a professional on these things. Now, here's an example of a monthly budget tracker, and I'm absolutely happy to distribute this if anybody's interested in it. But essentially what you want to do is write down all your income, so everything that you expect to come in, and then put all your expenses out there. And there's some extra spaces because sometimes there's things we don't think about or factor in. For me, pets is a big one. So that's an expense that can significantly increase, let alone an unexpected vet bill or something like that. So definitely put everything out there, and you can certainly, once you see it, you have a visual, you can figure out where you might need to make changes. Factor in subscriptions, prescriptions, gifts, things that we buy for the house, because that's really popular nowadays. We're stuck in our environment all the time, and we're seeing all the things that are wrong. So a monthly budget tracker is good to put together. One suggestion is that you can collect and track your receipts over 4 weeks, and that will help you to put your monthly budget together. Or some people are very aware of what comes in and out. So putting it out there will help you to make those adjustments and changes. A couple apps, which again are on the handouts that I'm just going to kind of breeze through, is there's free financial apps. So figure out what works for you, but just some suggestions is through your banking institution. So I'm with TD. They have a great app, the TD My Spend app. What I love about it is it's not all numbers, as I am not a numbers person. So it gives you a beautiful colored pie chart, and you see where you're spending your money: online, bills, groceries, things like that. So that's what helps me, is when I can get that visual. What's also great is you can put in some personal goals, so your phone can give you a little nudge to say, hey, you're overspending this month, what's going on? So sometimes it's that reminder that gets me back on track, or really makes me tighten the reins for the rest of the month. There's an app called Mint. A lot of our gambling overspending clients love this app. It's free. All of these are actually free. But in one app, it helps you to manage your finances, budget, and keep track of your expenses. So it's handy if you have it on your phone, because some people say, well, I'm out and about all day doing errands. It's difficult to write everything down. So look into apps if you have the available technology. And Wally, this is a really cool app. It's artificial intelligence. You actually get a bit of a motivational coach with it, but it helps you to track expenses, and you can take pictures of the receipts, which is a pretty neat feature. There's a lot of education and resources on there as well. Now, Credit Canada, I'm not sure if anybody's familiar with Credit Canada. It's a nonprofit agency. Us at Adapt, we work really closely with them. It's a really great service. So in the past, they used to help people with just consumer proposals and bankruptcy. Now they've expanded into much more of a diverse structure. So it's nonprofit, it's free. You can remain confidential if you would like, and they offer credit counseling. So they offer you 3 sessions. Right now it's telephone or virtual. You can usually get an appointment within 3 business days. What's a really great feature is commonly when you run a credit score report, you have to pay about $30, $40 for it. Credit Canada will run your credit score and report and explain it to you for free. So sometimes that's the incentive for people to go in. They also help you with budgeting. They have a free online budget planner, which I love. It's really easy. There's a lot of education on there if you need it as well. So they're a great resource to use if you have questions, you're curious, or maybe you've tried to manage your finances on your own and you just want a second opinion. So I highly recommend checking out their website. You can do a free debt assessment and then decide if you just want resources, or if you want to talk to someone, or if you got what you needed there. So I highly encourage that. What's really great about them is they've also done a lot of training for problem gambling and overspending. So there's no stigma attached to people coming in, as they work with pretty significant debt. They also work with low levels of debt. So they're quite comfortable meeting you with where you're at. So I'm coming to my conclusion here, and you might be sitting there saying that was a lot of information to take in, and I absolutely agree. But if you're sitting there feeling uncertain about your own spending or someone else's spending, and that could be towards gambling, gaming, technology use, all those kind of behavioral concerns, just remember that we're here for you. Is we have individual counselors, a variety of group programming for young people, adults, friends, and family. So if you're interested in any of that, please contact us. Again, our services are free and confidential, and we're Monday to Friday, 8:30 to 8 p.m. usually. So we also have a website up and running. We have a Facebook page, and we post regular newsletters, which have all our upcoming programming. So that's mine. I can hand it back over to you, Maria.
Thank you so much, Ashley. That was amazing. I will take this opportunity actually to hand it over to Christina, and she will help us out with the wrap up. Actually, I'm so sorry, before we even get there, I've been posting in the chat, and I'm just wondering if there is anyone who would like to share a comment or share a story or an experience, or if you have any questions for Ashley. This would probably be a good time. We could start with using the chat, but if we feel that we would like to have a conversation, I can certainly stop the recording, and you could come online and unmute yourself, as well as take your video and put yourself on. So I'll leave that up to our participants if you guys want to take a second to think about that. And in the meantime, I'll just keep an eye on the chat. While that's happening, perhaps Christina, you could talk about our wellness drop-ins.
Sure. Okay, so yes, we have a wellness drop-in program. It's called Everything But the Kitchen Sink. It's a safe space to explore and share different fun wellness activities. Our next one is actually it's next Wednesday, and we're going to be doing cake pops. So that might be something that some of you may be interested in. So please register at our website. And then we also have our space event. It's a Facebook Live event with Stephen Pathello, a show that introduces the world of mental health to children in a delicate and playful manner, using puppets who are just like him and you. And that actually, we have one coming up this Friday at 6:30, and you can also register on our website, Halton Family for Families. Oh, and you know what, let me mention the workshops too, some future workshops. We have, for February, we have National Eating Disorder Information Center, along with a variety of panelists discussing finding the balance, navigating conversation around healthy eating and exercise. And this workshop runs Wednesday, February 17th from 6:45 to 8 p.m. So also, again, you can check out any more information at our website.
I'm just looking at the chat here to see if there's any other comments. So far, we don't have any questions or comments. So I think we will wrap up. So I'll give it back to Christina to do our wrap up.
It'll be really quick.
Yeah,
we just want to say thank you again to everybody for joining us. And of course, a huge thank you to our presenter, Ashley from ADAPT. Thank you so much, Ashley. I really enjoyed hearing about the resources. I wasn't aware of all those apps. So that's really cool to know about. So thank you for sharing all that and all the wonderful information, of course. And your opinion is very important to us as we provide you with the best workshop experience. So please, if you guys don't mind, take a few minutes to complete our survey before you leave us. We would really appreciate it. And I'll give you back over to Maria Rosa.
Thank you. So once again, we'd like to thank our families and community for attending, and to Christina for co-facilitating. We will be sending out some resource information. It's a great page. I've been able to take a peek at it, and the links to all of those apps are there for anyone interested. I know there was some people asking in the chat, so yes, definitely you'll be receiving that information. It will also be on our website. If for some reason it doesn't come through your email, sometimes these things go to junk, etc. It will be posted on our website, Halton Families for Families. So I guess at this time, I'd like to say good night, be well, and stay safe. Feel free to disconnect, and we hope to Zoom with you all very soon. So thank you, guys.
Everyone.